Hello, welcome to Story Time for Home Time with me, James Mayhew. Today, a story from Estonia and an upside down picture. This story is called The Cook and the Goblin. There was once a duke who lived in a grand house, and he was very rich, so rich he could afford to pay a cook to cook all his dinners for him. Now, one day it was cold and miserable, and the cook thought, I will make a stew for the duke, that will cheer him up. He was a very good cook and he was a kind man, so he worked very hard in the kitchen trying to make this stew particularly nice for his master. And when it was ready, the smell filled the kitchen, and oh, it was so delicious. It wafted all around the grand house, and the duke was very excited because he could smell it from his room. But then suddenly, out from under the cooker, there appeared a goblin. And the goblin said, my goodness, that does smell like a very nice stew. Could I have a drop? Well, it's for the duke, said the cook. I shouldn't really give you any. Oh, come on, said the goblin. Look at me, I'm tiny. Wouldn't hurt to give me just a little tiny bit. Just a drop? Why, I just need a little drop of gravy. That would be enough for someone as small as me. Oh, all right then, said the cook, who was very, very kind. And he got a ladle and he dribbled some gravy down towards the goblin, who was holding out a cup. The goblin drank the cup of gravy and said, oh my goodness, that is a very good stew. And before the cook knew what was happening, the goblin jumped up beside the cooker, took the ladle, and he poured all the stew into the cup. Although the cup was very small, somehow all the stew went into it. And then he ran off with the cup and disappeared under the cooker. Well, said the cook, what am I going to do now? He went to see the duke and said, oh, duke, I'm terribly sorry, but a goblin came out from underneath the cooker and ate up your stew. Well, that's a likely story, said the duke. I don't believe a word of it. And if it's true, well, make me another one. So the poor cook went back down to the kitchen and started to make a second stew. Soon it was almost ready. If anything, it smelt even nicer than the first one. And straight away, from out underneath the cooker, there appeared that cheeky goblin. He said, oh, you know what? My wife isn't very well. She's quite poorly. And I think a little bit of stew would be just the thing to make her better. But you've got lots of stew. You took a whole cup full. Well, that was for me, said the goblin, but my wife didn't get any. Now, are you going to help me or not? Well, I shouldn't really, but I suppose your wife couldn't drink very much. That's right, said the goblin. She'll just have a little bit of gravy. And he held out the cup. The cook took his ladle and put some into the cup, but of course the goblin jumped up onto the cooker and took the ladle himself and poured the whole stew into his cup till there wasn't a drop of it left. All the meat and gravy and vegetables, everything. Then he ran back under the cooker and he disappeared. Oh, come back, shouted the cook. What am I going to tell my master, the duke? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, he will be cross. But the naughty little goblin had gone. Well, he thought he'd better make a third stew in case the duke was cross. So he made a third stew. He had just enough ingredients to do that. And then it was almost ready, and the kitchen once again was full of the delicious smell of wonderful stew. But all too soon, the goblin appeared and said, oh, I have a young boy, a son, who's terribly, terribly poorly. Now, please, just a drop, I mean, he's smaller than me, just a tiny drop of gravy. Doesn't need to be very much at all this time. And he held out the cup. Before the cook could say a word, that greedy goblin had jumped up onto the cooker and had taken all the stew again as before, filled his cup up to the brim and more, and then ran back underneath the cooker and disappeared. So it was a very nervous cook who went to see the duke and said, I'm sorry, so sorry, duke. I made 3 delicious stews. I really did make 3. And that goblin, he ate all of them. Him and his wife and his boy. They gobbled the whole lot up. Now the duke, who was not a very nice man, did not believe a word of it and said, get out of my house. You're no longer my cook, no longer welcome. You no longer have a job. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and leave. The poor cook was a bit afraid, and he ran back down to the kitchen and thought, oh, what am I going to do? Oh. Now, the Duke was terribly hungry by now because he still hadn't had his stew. So he said to his servant, you can be my cook from now on. I'll pay you more than I paid him, but go and make me a stew at once. So the servant ran down to the kitchen. Now, the servant was not a very good cook, but he tried his best to make a stew for the Duke. But not only was he not a very nice cook, he was also not a very nice person. He saw the poor old cook packing his things, and he laughed at him and said, serves you right for telling such stupid stories. Goblins and cookers, and honestly, who ever heard such a stupid thing? Soon his stew was nearly ready, and the servant ran up to tell the Duke to get ready for his dinner. Meanwhile, the Goblin appeared from under the cooker and said to the cook, I'm sorry you lost your job. I do feel a bit responsible. I suppose it's my fault. It can't be helped, said the cook, who was a kind person. Now, if you come with me, said the Goblin, I will give you something in return for all the food that you gave me. That's okay, said the cook. I don't need anything. No, trust me. Come with me, said the Goblin. Come with me under the cooker. Well, how can I possibly, said the cook. I can't fit under there. Yes, you can. Take my hand. So the cook took the Goblin's hand and he pulled him underneath the cooker, and somehow he fitted. He went right underneath and came out the other side underneath where there was a magical world, a world where the Goblin lived. And this world underneath the cooker was very beautiful. Gardens and trees. And there was a palace where the Goblin lived. And the palace was covered in jewels and diamonds and treasure. He took the cook inside and showed him all the rooms. The cook met his wife and his son, and then at last the Goblin took him to the very last room in the whole of his castle. Now, in all the other rooms there had been gold and treasure and silver and diamonds and rubies and things like that. But in the last room there was just a little box, a wooden box. And he gave this to the cook and said, this is my gift to you. I don't need gifts. It's okay, said the cook. I'll be all right. No, I insist, said the Goblin. This is a magic box. If you tap it with your forefinger 3 times, it will give you your heart's desire. Oh, will it really, said the cook, who didn't quite believe it. It will indeed, said the Goblin. Now, it's time to say goodbye. Well, thank you very, very much indeed, said the cook. You've been most kind to me. Farewell. Farewell, said the Goblin. You may never see me again. And he vanished in a puff of smoke, and suddenly the cook found himself back in the kitchen. And there was the servant coming to finish his stew and to give it to the greedy old Duke. The cook held the wooden box, and he thought, well, if I'm going to go off and leave, I suppose a satchel would be nice, with maybe some things for travelling. So he tapped the box and said, give me a satchel ready for a traveller. And pa-ching! There, on the table, was a satchel filled with a compass and a map and some good food and wine, all the things a traveller might need. Well, that's amazing, said the cook, and he tapped the box with his finger again 3 times and said, well, I need a purse and some money now. And pa-ching, there it was on the table, and the servant boy, who was now the cook, couldn't believe his eyes. He said, give that to me. I shan't, said the cook, it is mine. How did you get it? Said the servant. Well, the Goblin under the kitchen cooker told me to come with him into his magical kingdom, and he gave it to me. Not sure if that's true, said the servant, dishing up the stew to take to the Duke. Well, the cook took his purse of money, he took his bag with all his travelling things, and he set off. Meanwhile, the Duke ate the stew. The next day, the servant was cooking in the kitchen, and he suddenly thought, I wonder if it's true about the Goblin. So he made a delicious stew, and he called under the kitchen sink, and he said, Hey, Goblin, I'm making a stew. Do you want to come and try it? The Goblin came out and said, No, I'm all right, thanks. I've got lots of stew already in my tummy because the cook cooked it for me. Yeah, but I've made a stew now. Wouldn't you like to taste it? Then you can reward me. All right, then, said the Goblin, and he took just a couple of drops, and then he said, "Come with me under the cooker." The servant was very excited. He wanted to get a magic box like the cook. He followed him underneath the cooker. The Goblin led him through the castle, where he met the wife and the son of the Goblin. And then the servant was taken to the final room and was given a box. "This box contains all that you deserve," said the Goblin. The servant didn't bother saying thank you. He ran off with the box and soon found himself back in the kitchen, where he opened up the box and said, "Give me all I deserve." Well, out popped the Goblin, carrying a very, very large thing called a mace. It's a bit like a club that cavemen carry. And he banged the servant on the head. Then he ran upstairs and he banged the Duke on the head too. I'm afraid to say they both dropped dead. The Goblin vanished in a puff of smoke and was never seen again. Now, as for the cook, well, he went off with his magic box, and he found a beautiful house, and he tapped the box with his forefinger and bought the house, and he married a beautiful girl who lived next door and lived happily ever after. Even though he never once saw the Goblin, every day after he'd cooked his dinner, he would leave a little plate outside to say thank you to the Goblin, just in case. And you know what? Every morning that saucer of food was always empty. Now, if you'd like to win that picture, all you have to do is do some drawings yourself, maybe of the Goblin's castle underneath the cooker. I wonder if there's a Goblin underneath your cooker. Have you ever looked? Well, maybe it's time to have a glance underneath and see if you can see a magical world belonging to a Goblin. And if you find him, remember to be kind, because it's better to get a box with your heart's desire than a box with your just desserts. Okay, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for watching. Post your pictures on Twitter and Facebook. I'll choose a favourite and send that picture to you in the post. Bye.